Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this latest teaching session of the course on Technology and the Future of Medicine. Today we're going to talk about an introduction to regenerative medicine. And I think next time we're going to talk about when is regenerative medicine going to get out of its Wild West period. So this influences like how seriously you take this subject. How close to being mainstream is it? I think, as I'll point out in this lecture, it's getting quite close to being mainstream. So in 2016, when I was teaching this, I described how at the cutting edge of transplantation meeting that year, practically everybody who attended looked at the schedule and saw that there was this Sunday morning talking about regenerative medicine, and they thought, let's go sightseeing. So like there were like 300 people there, but at that session there were like 6. I was one of them, It was kind of shocking, but on the other hand, it was sort of cool to have such a well-organized session for just 6 people, So, but the next year, 2017, the Canadian Society of Transplantation meeting partnered with the Regenerative Medicine Society, and that seemed to work very well. And then last year, 2019, the LABMP Transplant Pathology meeting in Pittsburgh had regenerative medicine as the pre-meeting part of the meeting, a very important starting part of the meeting, and that worked well. And now what I'm working on is possibly bigger and more important than anything I've ever done in my whole career, is taking 12 different societies, 6 from regenerative medicine and 6 from transplantation, and bringing the worlds of regenerative medicine and transplant medicine together. So we're planning to do that probably in April 2021. So a little bit more than a year from now in Boston, because regenerative medicine in a lot of senses sort of began in Boston, so it makes sense to do it there. But so it's a rapidly evolving thing, and it is the entity within medicine that provides the possibility of providing organs to everyone. Transplantation as it's currently practiced would never be able to do that because there aren't enough donated organs. And no matter how you cut it, if you do things to increase organ donation, there still wouldn't be enough donated organs. But through regenerative medicine, there could be. So it's very important from that point of view. And it's also related to single-cell transcriptomics, or the Human Cell Atlas project. And you can find many talks that I've given about this. I don't know whether you do Facebook or they're active on social media, but what is fascinating about the Human Cell Atlas project is when it began, people who went to traditional medical meetings were hearing nothing about it, absolutely zero. There were no presentations on the Human Cell Atlas project or single-cell transcriptomics, whereas people on Facebook were hearing a lot about this because the Chan Zuckerberg initiative was the main funding for it when it started. You probably didn't know that Facebook ever funded anything important medically, but it did. And so they not only had funding from that entity, but the NIH and MRC and lots of other standard funding sources. Aviv Regenerative is the main person who started that and who is leading it, and it's a worldwide effort, possibly as important as the Human Genome Project. But now think about that. If somebody begins on Facebook, and if a lot of medical people don't do Facebook or suspicious of Facebook, how does that work in the long run? Well, it probably means that there's controversy. Not everybody agrees, right? And so the US Canadian Academy of Pathology meeting is sort of like the big pathology meeting every year. What's fascinating to me was that the people who went to that knew nothing about single-cell transcriptomics. I stayed home in 2017 and I gave a talk on it, and so the people who didn't go to the big pathology meeting knew way more about this than the people who did. It's kind of interesting. There is a publication which almost everybody in the kidney world, you'll see it in their offices and see them carrying it around and so on. And it's different from a journal. It's sort of like a newspaper. It's a bit shinier and a little bit higher quality pages than an ordinary newspaper. But anyway, it's called Kidney News. And it's used to promote things. So the American Society of Nephrology Kidney News uses this to promote various scientific and political initiatives and to promote meetings. So in many issues of Kidney News, there was this promo for the plenary session of the American Society of Nephrology meeting, which Shida, Mogi, and I went to. And it was very odd. I mean, just look at this and think about the symmetry here. So like there are 4 plenary speakers, and you've got their faces and their names, and they all must have a title for their talk, right? But there are only 3 talk titles here. And I don't think this is an error. As a matter of fact, one of the odd things about Kidney News is you get aberrations like this, but I think they're on purpose. I've never seen a typo in Kidney News. It seems to be very well proofread from that point of view. But on the other hand, I think powerful people in the field have the ability to go in there and change things. So they saw this Human Cell Atlas project thing and said, what is that, you know? And so why is it controversial? It's not just some sort of industry thing. It's also because the word atlas, I don't know if you find it appealing, if that word's exciting to you, but many people have used that word for many different things. The protein atlas, kidney atlas, so on and so forth. And probably those people didn't want all this prominence that's being given to the Human Cell Atlas. It sort of takes away some of the radiance of their own entity. And then bulk transcriptomics, taking pieces of tissue that you don't even know what they are and analyzing the transcripts in the entire piece of tissue, is something that's been going on for quite a long time, and many people have invested very strongly in it. And you can imagine it's much less precise than single-cell transcriptomics, where you're analyzing individual cells. And so, who knows why, but it was very interesting that I think there were 4 different issues of Kidney News that had the promo for the plenary sessions of the meeting, and they all looked like this. 4 speakers, 3 topics. So we get to the meeting, and even that is sort of interesting. Like, there's not much use of the term single-cell transcriptomics or Human Cell Atlas, even though that's the main thing that Aviv Regev usually talks about. She is sort of given marching orders that she should orient things slightly differently. And yeah, so it's very interesting. Anyway, you may wonder, what is the predominant thing here in regenerative medicine? Is it regenerative medicine, tissue engineering, cell therapy? How do those things relate? So they're all used to kind of describe the same things, but there are different trends that tissue engineering used to be a more popular term than it is now, and cell therapy is becoming increasingly popular. Whereas the phrase regenerative medicine has sort of stayed constant, right? So, but it's really hard sometimes to know exactly what people are talking about. They're not all talking about stem cell generated organs. Some of them are talking about stem cell repair ex vivo, where you harvest an organ and it's too damaged to use, but you sort of tune it up by giving it stem cells and nutrients and stuff to bring the organ back to health before you put it in somebody else. So current transplant protocols reach fewer than 10% of those in need. This is the year 2016. You can see there were worldwide 89,000 kidneys transplanted and so on. This is less than 10% of the global need. So you can imagine that the 136,000 solid organ transplants done in 2016, the number that were actually needed was like 1.4 million. That's what would actually be required. So the thing that's exciting about regenerative medicine is you could reach the remaining 90%. And in theory have organs for everyone. And that would be a very great improvement. Transplantation does many great things today, but if you think about it simply, the 90% of people who never receive an organ die waiting, right? So I mean, they may die for a lot of different reasons, and maybe not just because of the failure of the organ that they're waiting for and so on. It's a complicated thing. Anyway, for exams and stuff, you need to know this, okay? It's like, this is basic concept that we're teaching here, and you need to know about it. The situation is getting better, but it's not getting better that quickly. So regenerative medicine is sort of already here for simple organs, for tubular organs. You can make bladder, trachea, esophagus, vagina. Trachea is sort of interesting. There was a lot of sort of hidden problems with trachea regenerative medicine. A lot of the patients died and that wasn't reported and so on. So that's sort of the dark side of regenerative medicine thus far, one of the dark sides. I'll talk about some others. But so it's not all been successful, even with sort of simpler organs. But if you think about the trachea, it has cartilaginous rings. You can't allow it to collapse, or you won't be able to breathe and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit more complicated than something like the bladder, which just has to sit there and sort of collect urine, right? It doesn't have to do a lot, really. Okay, and then you may be thinking, like all other exciting things in the world, that because when you look at the US map, We are the only major city in Canada off the US map because we're too far north. That probably there's nothing important happening here, but that's not true because James Shapiro is here and he's one of the PIs in a very important study, the ViaCyte study, using encapsulated pancreatic progenitor cells to treat type 1 diabetes, and that's going quite well, and so that's taking place right here. The other thing that's taking place right here is the work of Timothy Caulfield, who is sort of studying the influence of celebrity and particularly uninformed celebrity opinions. People who are appealing to large numbers of ordinary humans, but don't really know anything about science, advocating things. And so you're probably aware is this book, Is Gwyneth Paltrow Wrong About Everything? ? And many other books like that. And he's one of the best speakers on the faculty at the U of A, and because he's hung out with celebrities so often, he's kind of one himself, or a little bit closer than the rest of us. But he runs the Health Law Institute, and they are regularly producing important papers, and maybe the best papers in the world having to do with stem cell hype, and stem cell fraud, and stem cell tourism. So stem cell hype is sort of over-promising what regenerative medicine can do. And stem cell fraud is offering supposed stem cell therapies when you don't really know how to do that, and maybe you're just offering saline, without anything in it, no cells. But maybe you are offering cells, but these cells are not going to do what the person wants. They can create disfiguring calcifications and tumors and all sorts of other things. And if you look in the local newspapers, you will see ads, even in Western Canada, for clinics like this. Now, how can that occur? There must be laws and so on. But if you think about it this way, if you give somebody your own cells and they grow them up and give them back to you, that's not something that there's a lot of regulations around, right? This is just stuff from you going back into you, right? So that's one of the reasons that worldwide this is a little bit hard to regulate, even though there are all sorts of crooks and bad people making money harming people, so that for Health Protection Canada and the FDA, this is one of the biggest problems that they have. They employ more people to try to prevent the public being harmed by this than just about anything else. So it's hard then, it's sort of like my first lecture, talking about taking two conflicting ideas and accepting them both, right? Because that's what you have to do here. So to think about what is the greatest hope for the future of the health of the human race, regenerative medicine is that hope. And what is the area with the greatest intellectual dishonesty and fraud and inappropriate hype? Regenerative medicine is also that area. So it's hard for you to accept that sort of complexity, but that's just the way it is. And these are just some of the articles from the Health Law. Many of them have amusing celebrity-oriented titles. From Kim Kardashian to Dr. Oz, future relevance of popular culture in our health and health policy, so on and so forth. But anyway, it's something very important, very exciting going on right here at the U of A. So There are, in areas of medicine of interest to me, transplantation and kidney medicine, to a certain extent, the luster that was once there is sort of gone. People used to be very proud to be in those fields, and they were very appealing specialties of medicine to go into for young people. And now we're in a situation where they're really relatively unpopular worldwide. And so, in theory, the success of regenerative medicine can turn all that around. So people become excited about renal medicine and transplantation again. And I think that will happen, it's just a matter of when. So this is kind of a joke, but you'll recognize this as another graph reflecting Moore's law, right? So anyway, we can think about technological unemployment, machines being smarter than unaugmented humans. So David Pierce, who's speaking in this course on March the 3rd, he's a very famous philosopher who was one of the people who started transhumanism, and you can look at many previous Skype sessions with him. They're very interesting, not only what he says, but also the interaction with the students and what the students say and so on. So it's a time for you to really shine and to talk to a very famous and important person. But he says the only flaw he can find in the course is that when I talk about machines being smarter than individual humans, I should be saying unaugmented humans, because he thinks more and more that, you know, we'll be sort of joining with machines. We'll have brain implants and all that kind of thing. And so machines won't necessarily be smarter than the combination of us plus the implants, but they will be smarter than unaugmented humans. So that's what I will say from here on out. So what I'm known for is the LABMP classification of kidney transplant pathology. This began 29 years ago, 1991, and I run the meetings every 2 years. So we're talking about a LABMP classification of tissue engineering pathology in the future that would be something bigger and more exciting than transplant pathology, because it would serve at least tenfold more people. So it'd be a larger enterprise with more companies, more money in it. Everything would be bigger, and it's coming. I don't know exactly when and exactly how, but it is coming. Now, one thing that you might be sitting there thinking there are advantages and disadvantages about hearing about something from the guy who started it, right? It's like, you might want to know, well, what do other people think? This is the guy who started it, and he's telling us about this, what other people think. So this is what Ben Adam thinks. And that is, so he says that the LABMP classification gives you the imprimatur that you know what you're doing in transplantation pathology. If you use LABMP scoring, people say, aha, this person knows what they're doing. So imprimatur, I don't know if you know that word, but it comes from the early days of printing books, where they'd reach a point and they'd say, imprimatur, let it be printed, right? So that's what imprimatur means. Okay, so that's what the youngest person on our faculty thinks about the LABMP classification. These are some of the milestones. And there are an increasing number of papers citing the LABMP classification every year, and this is continuing. There are now more than 10,000 literature citations to the BAMF classification. And this is kind of how it works. It's a consensus generating system with experts moderating consensus. That doesn't happen very often. If you were to start generate consensus about something, what you very quickly learn is the accepted way to do that is with a professional facilitator who knows nothing about what you're generating consensus about, but everything about how to get people to think in a new way and generate consensus. So it comes into the room and gets people to put post-it notes up on the board, and magically consensus happens and so on. We've never done it that way. We've always done it with me or somebody else like me moderating consensus. So how is that possible? You have to be humble, right? You come into the room saying, my way or the highway, you know, sort of testosterone-infused male machoism. That will never work, because if somebody has a better idea than you, you're not going to accept their idea, and the whole consensus generation is wrecked by your machoism, right? So you have to be sort of humble, and you have to hold back. If somebody else has ideas that the other people in the room like, you have to let that person talk more than you, right? And not keep butting in and stuff. Yeah, so it's very interesting. Why does this work, though? One of the things is, this is not a life and death situation. If you can think of a different circumstance where the stakes are much higher, and people in the room represent people who are actually going to die and all this sort of thing, right? Then you probably can't have a sort of expert facilitator who has a stake in the game running things. But this is slightly more calm, right? I mean, this is not life and death. It's important stuff, but it's calm and cool enough that you can sort of dispassionately talk about it. And in that setting, you can have an expert facilitator. And so that's what we've been doing the past 29 years, and it applies to all solid organs. These are some pictures. The slides probably vary quite a lot. Like the ones that appeal the most to me probably appeal the least to you. I understand that. So the 2017 meeting was in Barcelona, and the 2019 meeting was in Pittsburgh. The next meeting is in Banff, Alberta, Canada, and then in Paris, and then Leuven, the Netherlands, and then somewhere in Asia or Australasia. And yeah, anyway, we're planning meetings till 2027, 2029, so we presume that this will go on forever. The world is changing. How does one know? Well, I think this cover in November 2014 on the most widely respected journal in transplantation, AJT, the American Journal of Transplantation, really made a lot of people sit up and think, because they thought in 2014 that this was like decades off, that there wasn't going to be the possibility of generating new organs through stem cells, and then this journal cover appeared, building new hearts, and you could show models where you take stem cell constructs and fuse them into a decellularized heart, and after a while the heart starts to beat and stuff. You know, it's very exciting. Now, in fairness, generally it doesn't beat as strongly as a normal heart, and so there's still things to work on. And there are things to work on in every organ. But anyway, this is the basic idea. You've got cells, scaffold, bioactive factors, tissue engineering construct that then recreates the organ. And I keep asking whether this slide is needed. Yes, it is. There's still a kind of feeling that, yeah, this ain't ever gonna happen, and I don't have to think about this and so on, because the current world is quite different from the world of regenerative medicine. So you need to sort of jumpstart people's thinking and get them thinking about this is really the way to solve most of these organ replacement problems that we have. Do Canadians want this? Yes, Canadians want this. Canadian support for radical life extension resulting from advances in regenerative medicine is strong. So it's a kind of Canadian thing. They told you that the Sony Aibo robotic dog is not a very Canadian thing. No ordinary Canadians bought it, only computer scientists, whereas this is a Canadian thing. Canadians seem quite keen on regenerative medicine. And in a way, making this happen is kind of equivalent to the technological singularity, but applied to medicine. And that's what's being shown here. You've got the original native heart. You flush out all the cells it used to have, put in new cells that are compatible with the person you want to put the heart into, and then regenerate the heart. And comparable things for other people. Well, what would tissue engineering pathology be then? So in a lot of these constructs, the organs you're creating are not absolutely normal. And so you need to figure out, are they close enough to normal to provide a net benefit, or are they actually so aberrant and so different from normal that they shouldn't be transplanted? So for instance, in the kidney, when you decellularize a kidney and then recellularize a kidney, you get a lot of strange things. So like podocytes, these brown staining cells here, ordinarily exist only in the glomerulus. But in that circumstance, with a recellularized kidney, find a lot of podocytes wandering around in the interstitium, a place where they never ever normally are. And a lot of other parts of this kidney don't have any cells at all, whereas normally they would, and so on. So what tissue engineering, what the LABMP classification of tissue engineering pathology will be, is consensus-generated standard for how close to normal the pathology of the regenerated organ has to be in order to be put into people. And it may seem to you like this has nothing to do with you. It's different from the way the trajectory of your life is going, and so you have nothing to contribute and you just wish I'd stop talking about it, but that's wrong, because almost anything about biology and medicine that you know about, that you learned about, can be applied here. Even things that you thought you were forced to learn for a test and would never need again. And there are lots of things like that, right? But many of those things come up again in the stem cell regenerated organs, because you're asking rather simple questions, you know, like if there are none of this cell that is usually there, will the organ still work? You know, simple things that probably when you learned about, like, you know, histology of various organs and stuff, you know, it never occurred to you to think about what happens if of the 52 kinds of cells that are normally there, you've only got like 36, right? And what if they're not in the right places? And so how close to the kind of histology that you learned about do these things have to be? And these are questions that everybody can contribute to the answer to. Even using some of the stuff that you learned for exams in the past, and you thought, well, that's history, I'll never need that. It applies here. Like old-fashioned concepts like the stunned myocardium and Neil Bricker's intact nephron hypothesis from 1960 and stuff like that. These are things that I think, like 10 or 15 years ago, virtually everybody in medicine said, yeah, I had to learn about that. It's of zero relevance now. No one cares. It's nothing now. And now these same concepts come up again when you're thinking about which organs will work and which ones won't. So many problems with stem cell generated organs are not being discussed, and you can make this happen by getting involved in the discussion. You may question that, but I'm sure you can. Recellularized organs clot like crazy, impossible to generate more than about 80% of the endothelial surface in the large arteries going into the organs. And the parts of the arteries without endothelium clot like crazy. And so I'm sure that's a solvable problem. It may be a fairly simple problem, but it's a big problem at the moment. It's hard to get the right types of cells in the right places. Podocytes, those cells I was telling you that are associated with the glomerular capillaries, seem to be terminally differentiated cells. Attempts to culture them, they often turn into a different type of cell. Kidney progenitor cells are difficult to identify. So kidney work has lagged behind. Also, the kidney is a series circuit. If you think about electrical circuits, how to get things in the right order, right? Whereas most other organs, if you just sort of mix up all the cells, and if they're just kind of random, and if there are a lot of parallel paths, the organ will still do something useful. In the kidney, that's not really true. You have to have things in the right sequence. It's a tube that starts here and ends here and so on. So it's really the moonshot when we're able to make regenerative medicine generated kidneys. That will really be a moment. We can do it now with very tiny kidneys, but not with human-sized kidneys. So the BAMP Foundation for Allograft Pathology, the BAMP meetings must adapt to future changes in the field of transplantation. So what does that mean? Simply, transplant pathologists will become tissue engineering pathologists gradually over the next 15 years. And many of the questions that need to be posed are old-fashioned questions, as I just said. So the focus of the BAMP classification of tissue engineering pathology is on sustaining life. Sort of opposite, when classification of disease began, it was all autopsy-based and sort of dying and death and, you know, what causes person to die and stuff. That was the original sort of main theme of classifications in medicine. So, and it doesn't provide any benefit to insult the stem cell generated organ. Like, people take this stem cell generated kidney in rodents and say, can you really call this a kidney? Well, yeah, call it a kidney. It has a kidney underlying substrate that you're infusing the cells into. It's got glomeruli, tubules, all the sorts of things that a kidney has. They're just a bit different. The tubule, rather than just being a single tube, has this multiple interconnected pathways within it. The glomerulus has many too few cells and too few open capillaries. And the interstitium is just mainly empty. There should be cells there and there aren't. So a lot of things wrong with it. But it still may provide net benefit. Now, another thing that's interesting about this paper of mine on the BAMP classification of tissue engineering pathology is that one day in the lab I said, "Who can draw?" And most of the students all looked embarrassed, and Corey Funk raised his hand and said, "I can." So I said, "Okay, well, I'm writing this paper and I'd like you to do sketches of these things." And nobody intended for those sketches to be the final art. But then the editor was excited about the paper, wanted it to be in the same issue as other important papers, so fast-tracked it, and didn't really realize that we intended that these student pencil sketches would be redrawn by a professional artist. So that never happened. Yeah, so this is the actual art that's in the paper. And that's really interesting. It shows that students can be closer to the final product than you probably ever imagined. Now we are realizing it would be good to still get a professional artist to recreate this stuff, and so we are going to do that. So many questions would be asked here. Is it too much endothelial disruption for the organ to receive the proper blood flow? What are the chances of tumors forming? The classification category should not be one-off, like just a unique way to classify a situation you'd only encounter once, but should be generalizable. Tissue engineering pathology has been up until now rather dull. Most reports were of scaffolds with no inflammatory reaction. It's sort of like in those movies, move along, nothing to see here, pathology. But it's going to get very much more exciting soon. So as we've gone through this, think about your own emotions about this, and was there any resistance to this subject matter? I mean, did you enjoy this just as much as other subjects? Probably not. The idea of you can't tell whether regenerative medicine is like mainly good or mainly bad, and it's just a little bit confusing. So it falls in a category that actually artificial intelligence safety also falls into. It's a subject that a lot of people voluntarily would not go to a lecture on. How are you going to teach people stuff that they would not voluntarily go to a lecture on? So some time ago, we got the idea of putting these same concepts in poetry and music and entertaining people in the evening, and that really works. We've done it around the world. We did it here in January 2019. And we'll do it again, I'm sure. It's a collaboration with Sarah Mallory Chapman, who's 25. Her band has recently added modular synthesizer, and so you can have circumstances. See if this doesn't resonate with other things we talk about in the course, like machine replacement of human labor. Okay, so the band's playing, and it's great music, and suddenly all the human band members stop playing. You're hearing only the synthesizer reworking the same musical bits, but it sounds better than when people were actually playing. So it's a very good analogy for how we think the world might be when machines are smarter than unaugmented humans. And you'll probably encounter that. So, yeah. So I told you about meeting Aviv Regev. This is Ishita and me meeting her at the ASM meeting. We thought she needed our help to promote this stuff, and then she went on national public radio and stuff, and I realized she doesn't need our help. She's very good at she's very self-sufficient at promoting her own stuff. So, that's it. My goodness, it's only 10 minutes to 3 and we're done. In our original location for the BAMF classification, we had mule deer poking their heads into meeting rooms, and we've come a long way. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. So is this in surgery? This must be something that people talk about quite a bit. You have a number of people there working on regenerative.
I'm actually doing tissue engineering of heart valves.
Yeah,
as my thesis.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so tell us a bit about that. What will the tissue engineered heart valves be able to do? How biocompatible are they? Are they genetically identical to the people they're going into? How does all that work?
So there's a PhD student working on something similar, and he's working on xenografts. So he's taking, well, he hopes to take porcine valves and decellularize them and recellularize them with autologous cells from the mesenchymal stem cells from the recipient.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue with that is non-primate mammals have like alpha-gal, which
Right.
the immune system has been known to, the human immune system has been known to target that and attack it. So when you implant biological valves from porcine or bovine subjects, like the immune system attacks them, and that's the issue they have with bioprosthetic valves currently. So they have to be replaced within 5 to 10 years. And so it's really not ideal for young patients because they have to have reoperations and all of that. And the other options are mechanical valves, which you have to be on anticoagulation medicine for the rest of your life, which is not ideal, again, for young patients. So the idea with the tissue engineering is obviously to make it, to mask the immune response. So try to take the cells off that are not native and put on native cells, and hopefully for the xenografts mask the alpha-gal, because with the decellularization process we've been using, it doesn't remove alpha-gal. But what I'm working on is I'm actually working on allografts. So I'm taking, currently I'm just using pericardium, decellularizing it, recellularizing it, and measuring the immune response. But so far it's been effective, but there's a lot of issues with it, like losing strength, losing collagen fibers and things like that, which obviously you don't want to lose strength within the leaflets of the valve.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's wonderful that you know, the work you're doing is so relevant to what we're talking about here. So what I'm going to talk about next time is sort of how the transition is going to be between the current state where everything is sort of ad hoc and there's not a sort of standard mainstream way of doing this, and not just off-the-shelf therapies, you know, and how we're going to make that transition and what the likely time course is. Yeah, so that's great. So did what I say make sense to you? Yeah, okay, good. That's good. Well, let me just go back to talking about David Pierce for a second. So when he speaks on March 3rd, he hasn't taught in the course for about 5 years, something like that. So I would like you, and I think you would like also, to be well prepared. So you can ask him good questions, you can get to know him. He sort of loves the interaction with students, and you can see that in the previous videos. And Corey Fung, who I was talking about, who ended up working in my lab and did the pencil sketches, first came to my attention the day that David Pierce Skyped with us, and Corey was up there asking really good questions in an animated way and so on. I think we'll probably have a number of the students who have already taken the course and who are associated with it also here, so it's not solely dependent upon you guys. But I think it is worth preparing for, not so much because I want you to do that, but I think you would want to feel prepared. So that you know, why is David Pierce famous? What has he done? You know, what are his main ideas? He particularly has been an advocate of the idea that the world would be a much better place if women were in charge of absolutely everything. He realizes that's not completely practical for a lot of reasons. But anyway, there are a lot of simple things like that, and then thinking about whether there needs to be pain and suffering at all. Right now, human motivation is in a spectrum that contains an equal amount of pain and pleasure. You could imagine motivating people where it's all on the pleasure side, right? Where there is no pain, it's just sort of less pleasure, more pleasure, and so on. And so he's been talking a great deal about that, about resetting that point of where, how you're usually feeling during the day. You necessarily have to have a point in the day where you feel absolutely rotten and terrible, or whether there could just be some sort of from normal feeling to feeling really good, and whether that would be a, you know, sufficient way for humans to be. So a lot of his ideas are quite surprising, but he's a very well-respected guy, and I can tell you he's very excited about teaching here again. I sort of, you know, abandoned him or forgot about him for the last 5 years, and so it'd be nice to have him back again. Similarly, if you want to search on Shauna Pandya's videos, you can see what she's like. And Pandya, Shauna Pandya. She hasn't taught, I guess, for the last 3 years, but she was staple in the course before that. She's talking about new subjects. Human resilience is one of them, and space is one. So she used to talk about sort of engineering the future, and then she would give a workshop on that. So she used to just give 2 lectures, and now she's doing 4. So we're getting a lot of exciting stuff from her. And if you search generally, so like search on Shauna Pandya without the word Solez, then you'll get other YouTube videos that are not from the course. And you see a lot of them deal with, you know, resilience and stuff like that. Resilience is a very popular subject. Virtually everyone in the world is interested in being more resilient, and it's one of her main subjects. She's just coming back from a simulated Mars thing. That's what she's doing right now. So she's completely out of contact in one of these simulated Mars experiences. I think she's the leader of a team of 6. It's kind of cool. She isn't an astronaut yet, but you can imagine that as she piles up more accomplishments that she will be. She's been in near space weightless environment and stuff, so other things you can do that are similar. Okay, any questions about any of that? Looks like I'm letting you go a little bit early, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, thank you very much.